What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another local stream here. This one will be in Critter format, the format based around July 2002, way back at the start of the TCG's history. And this is one that I think people have a lot of appreciation for. I personally like it a lot. I think it's a very good format. Uh, yeah, I mean, what else is there to say, really? It's a bit of a slower, grindier format, so expect this to be a bit of a longer locals, even though we have, less people. We only have 5 people signed up so far. And I think we're going to start things off now because if I've learned one thing from doing some of these really old formats, it does take a while to actually get going. So even though we will have one person with a bye, we're just going to get things started now. So I'm going to shuffle the seed twice, as I always do when I do this sort of thing. So that way there's no like, oh, you just shuffled it until you got a bracket you like. This is the bracket we're going for, and we're going to start the tournament. So let's get this party started. I will send the bracket to the Discord channel. And if you want to play in these locals for yourself in the future, head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. But yeah, we'll get this party started. Okay, so looking at the Chalon bracket, we got Hylian versus Soul and Wagmuffin versus Dump Truck to start things off. The wheel to side there is for at the end of the stream when we pick the next locals format that we're going to be doing. And then after that locals, we're going to be having 2 Lightsworn format locals because I think that I will hopefully be back on track by that point to then have a Lightsworn monthly in the month of July. So that'll be exciting. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm part of why my content slowed down for a bit was because I was in a master's program. I'm still in that master's program, but there's a slight break between the first quarter, which just ended, and the next quarter, which is starting soon. So, so that is going to enable me to make hopefully a little bit more videos than I have been recently, and hopefully finish off cat format and then dive into Lightsworn. I'm excited for Lightsworn because Lightsworn, I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've heard it's very similar to Edison, which I do enjoy as well. So should be fun. Whichever of these games starts first is the game that we'll jump into here and see what's happening. Oh, we got Arkanoid. That's a cool name. Maybe they're an Android fan, or maybe they're an Arch Android fan. Looks like the Dump Truck versus Wagmuffin game is starting here, so let's dive into that one. See how it goes. Let me mute the sounds on here. We're going to be diving in to the games. This is the old version of Yu-Gi-Oh! So you do get to draw for turn, going first. The most skilled format, says Steven Yurosevich, and I would agree that it's definitely a very skill-intensive format. I forget when I did my video ranking the formats based on skill, if this was the most skilled. It was definitely up there in the top tier. And for a good reason. I think this format is, there's a lot that you have to keep in mind, like turn to turn. You got to plan out your turns in advance. You got to have a really good grasp on both the fundamentals and the higher levels of play. And so it is very fun, very skill intensive, and yeah, it's just a good time. Like, I think this format is great, and I hope that, more eyes on it helps it prosper a little bit more. I think it is one of the more popular DM era formats because it is one of the ones that is before when power creep gets like too crazy, which is kind of wild to say for, DM era, but it's how it goes sometimes. Card destruction here, turn 1. That will give Wagmuffin a little bit more hand info and also, clear out their hand of those Thunder Dragons to draw them some more cards here. Looting a Sangan, though, was a bit awkward, but it seems like they're trying to draw into something better. Card destruction is an interesting card to have in main. Exodia is a deck in this format that has had some past success, so that's potentially a reason why you'd main it. But a lot of people have sort of come down on card destruction. They don't really like it as much, just because it's like it's a -1 compared to something like a Robin Goblin, which represents basically at least a 1-for-1 trade a lot of the time, and potentially more. So Robin Goblin is generally, at least my preferred hand destruction thing of choice, especially because Exodia is a bit less prevalent now because it sort of suffered from its own success where it became very successful and then people just hard countered it because it is very easy to counter. If they lose their Exodia pieces in hand, they just lose the game a lot of the time. And so, people then sort of shift away from the hard counters, but they do still have generally 1 or 2 Exodia counters in their deck. So like White Magical Hat, common one to see because it's searchable off Sangan or Witch. So that way you can actually add it to hand. Oh my word. Wow. Wow, that is kind of wild. Generally, you don't see such early concessions in this format because the games are just so grindy that it's really hard to like just completely brick, right? Critter is peak, says Lacrind, and I agree. It is definitely a peak format. One of my favorite formats, in my opinion. For me personally, it's not my favorite of the DM era. That's edged out by Yada format, which I do like. But I do think it's more skillful than Yada, personally. I think it's one that could definitely take off with more people. Yada format I just like because it's like the chaos of it appeals to me. Whereas Critter is, I'd say, sort of like the opposite of chaos. But it's very, very fun for that, right? It's very control oriented. If you like those sorts of games, you're gonna love this format. Like if you like Goat format, I think you'd like Critter format, honestly. They're sort of like appealing to the same reason why you go back and play retro Yu-Gi-Oh! For the, grindier games, the more control oriented games. And, Critter format didn't have a deck like Chaos Turbo, which is a bit faster than everything else in the format, and a bit more dominant. There are some very good decks, like Mass Control is a good deck, for instance, and it seems like Dump Truck is playing that. They've got the Mass Sorcerer there, but it is still very, very fun. Lacrin says, literally played it with friends an hour ago, and we had a blast. It's both very chaotic and very grindy at the same time. Yeah, I mean, there is some chaos to Critter, I will say. I'm not trying to say that there's no chaos whatsoever in its complete control games, because, Labyrinthine Turbo is a deck that's managed to top in the past. Like, there are some cool things going on here. Last Will stuff can make some creative shenanigans happen as well. But compared to some of the more chaotic elements of the DM era that happened later when just everyone's throwing power cards around left and right, it is definitely a very different experience. So sorry if I implied that there was no chaos to it, but it is very, very fun. And you get into these very interesting game states. Trap Hole on a Sangan, very rare to see. Kind of surprised that they did that, but that means that they're kind of like really down bad if they're doing that, right? Because basically you're trading 1,000 life points for basically a card, right? Because they just replaced the Sangan that they just summoned out. So they're not really losing much from that interaction, where Wagmuffin is potentially losing a fair bit. So yeah, it is kind of rough for them. They're going to bring out a Witch of the Black Forest there, tack into that Mass Sorcerer that will indeed go through, clearing that, and finally cutting off that draw engine there that Dump Truck had going on. But look at Dump Truck's card advantage here. They got 6 cards in hand, 2 cards on field, so 8 cards total to Wagmuffin's 4. So that is just completely insane. Part of why Mass Sorcerer is such a good card in this format. Trap Hole coming down, so it seems like that is why they used the previous Trap Hole, because they just had another, so they might as well use multiple. But the 7-tooled Bandit there is going to stop that, which will enable Dump Truck to crash their Witch in and then poke in for another 1,000. So I don't necessarily know if it was worth 7-tooling the Trap Hole. I feel like you're probably still fine, but I guess this does keep tempo for you, and you get to search. I can also get the search here. They're going to search out a T-Drag, which is kind of interesting. You don't generally see that often. Did Dump Truck not attack? I don't think they attacked with the Sangan there. That was, I think, a misplay. I guess I just forgot. But it goes well, PJ. How goes it with you? Yeah, I'm having fun watching some good old-fashioned Critter gameplay here. And this is a very interesting match because we're already on game 2. Dump Truck just, scooped it up game 1 very early. But I guess they must have just completely bricked, which is kind of rough. It can happen in this format. It's a bit rare because Sangan and Witch can get you back into it very easily. Card destruction coming down here, which is why they searched out the Thunder Dragon instead of something else. And Dump Truck lost a fair amount of good cards there. Change of Heart, Magician of Faith, Solemn. A lot of good ones there. Wagmuffin losing a Giant Soldier, a Thunder Dragon, a Sangan, and a Thunder Dragon. I maybe would have committed something here. Like maybe you set the Giant Soldier, then go for card D. Do it more defensive. But like, I feel like it is valuable to do because otherwise you might not draw a monster you want to commit. Like Muka is like not really the best here. Muka is a very, very good card in general in this format. But when you're only at 1,500 attack on the Muka, it's a bit worse than you might be otherwise. That's going to poke in over the Sangan. That's going to get a Search of the Witch there. And then is Wagmuffin going to set one and reduce the Muka down to 12? I don't know. 12 is enough to wall off a Witch, and they did card destruction away the Lodgin. So Deadrick might not have a way to get over the Muka here. But yeah, I agree. It's a very nice format to come back to once in a while. I think it's one of the best formats that we found on the channel. So I'm very happy about it. But oh my goodness, a card destruction. Just clearing away Dump Truck's hand entirely. Are they going to try and go for deck out here? Like, that's kind of wild. Not gonna lie. They did clear out a 7-colored fish there as well. Heavy Storm on the backer there, so Wagmuffin losing everything, but a Waboku will come down to at least protect their life points. But that Muka is not looking too hot here. Hitting a Mirror Force as well. Very unfortunate to lose that. And now Dumptruck just setting one, setting another, passing back. Setting another as well. Okay. An L set and pass. Yeah, this is a bit of an interesting one. I think Wagmuffin is in a very rough spot here. They basically have no cards. They're just kind of hoping. And unfortunately, Raigeki is going to put an end to their hopes a bit. And also hitting a Magician of Faith there as well. That was probably something that Wagmuffin wanted to use there. Get back another card destruction. Just rip out the hand. Although, if Dumptruck sees that, Wagmuffin gets back a card destruction, they're just going to set the cards that they care about. And Master Sorcerer is going to come down here, draw Dumptruck another card. So the card advantage is spiraling out of control for Dumptruck here. And I think that they pretty much have game 2 on lock. Anything can happen in this format, though, so maybe there's something that will change the tide of things. But Raigeki is something to potentially change the tide of things. But Magic Jammer is going to come down and preserve those monsters on field. So Dumptruck's playing a bit more of a negate-oriented deck. Are they playing Horn of Heaven as well? I don't quite see that yet. But Horn of Heaven, I actually put in the thumbnail because that's one of the sort of like innovations that people did in this format. Namely, I believe Jazz from Format Library did a deck with Horn of Heaven with the reasoning that like there are actually a lot of good cards that you contribute for it. Like, for instance, if your opponent's summoning Sangan out into a Mass Sorcerer, right, you're going to lose the Mass Sorcerer anyway, so you may as well negate the Sangan, cut off the sort of recruiter chain that they might get otherwise, right? So, there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with Horn of Heaven. But people look down on it for a very long time because it does have a pretty steep cost. But, generally prove that it is something that can be worth doing. And diving into Soul versus Hylian, we see Soul making the twin-headed Thunder Dragon there. Very, very fun sort of thing that you can do in this format, going for a fusion monster. And it's something that, like, I think it has its doubters, to be fair. But, Labyrinth Tank Turbo has won past events. I would say that if you're doing a fusion-style deck, you generally want to just focus on the Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. We haven't seen Gigtech Wolf, in this deck yet, so maybe they're playing the Labyrinth Tank version. Maybe they're just playing a version with Twin Head. But I do like it as sort of another bomb that Muka Muka Turbo can drop. Muka Muka Turbo being a more aggressive deck in the format, where you can basically play Muka Muka, play a bunch of cards to buff it up, like Thunder Dragon in hand, and that can actually be quite a big threat in this format. So after you've gone through your Mukas and done all that, it can be good to just have this extension with Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, playing one Polymerization, and going into that can be very, very nice. So I like that strategy at least. So it's cool to see Soul with that on their field. Hylian down to 3,800. It's not the best spot to be in, but that Twin Head is pretty vulnerable here, not going to lie. Muka is going to come down, so that's going to be a big Muka. But Swords is also going to come down, so it's going to block off the Twin Head, and then another card's going to come down as well. Pacers or Thunder in Game 7. I wish I was informed enough about basketball to actually make a actually good opinion about that. I apologize. But I think I'm going to call it for the Thunder, I believe. And why is that? Because I think they're a pretty okay team. Ha 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 ha. Yeah. That's the extent of what I could say about that game. But I do know it's a pretty hype one. I sure stopped following when the Celtics were gone because I'm a Celtics fan. So, once my team's out, I just, I kind of tap out a bit. But yeah, this will be exact lethal here because Raigeki and then Sangan coming down to be 3,800 there. So Soul taking game 1. Let's dive back in to Wagmuffin versus Dumptruck here. But yeah, I mean, I've been driving all my basketball fans crazy with that joke there. But, Change of Heart into Thunder Dragon is pretty brutal. So Change of Heart, add back Change of Heart, tribute over for Thunder Dragon, get in for 16. And, yeah, it's very, very good there. And I think that Dumptruck had a pretty good read here that, Magician of Faith was set because Reborn was used up very early. Generally, you don't use up Reborn that early. So I think that makes sense why they went for the Change of Heart there, even though it is a little bit aggressive. But Wagmuffin is in a bit of a spot here. We know that Dumptruck has Change of Heart in hand, so they can use that on whatever Wagmuffin does here. So we got to see what they decide to do. Do you set a monster, hoping that Dumptruck takes it and it's a bluff? Or do you set a monster that's actually live and then hoping Dumptruck doesn't take it because they think it's a bluff? There's sort of mind games that can go on in this format, and it's part of what makes the format so fun and skill intensive. There's a lot of like poker-esque elements in this format, and that's part of what makes it so good. So yeah, it really is a gem in my opinion. It might be too slow for some people, which is perfectly fair. You don't have to like every format, or like the pace of everything as well. Fisher coming down on the Thunder Dragon, but yeah, I do agree with PJ. Low skill floor, high skill ceiling. Like anyone can sort of pick up a deck and critter and play it pretty easily. It's not like there are complicated lines that you have to learn. I'd say the more complicated stuff, it's just like being able to use Prio on Cannon Soldier, knowing when to do that to end the game. But other than that, there isn't really anything like complicated in this format, I'd say. If I'm wrong, comments will let me know as well. I guess Last Will can be kind of complicated, but you're not using it for complicated plays really often, if you do use it. But I think what the format is great at is just teaching people fundamentals of the game as well, because it really does have a high skill ceiling. There's a lot of depth to this format, a lot of just different things that you can consider, a lot of metagaming that you can do when it comes to tournaments and seeing the trends and what people are playing. I mean, people do that with GOAT format a lot, and I feel like we're already kind of at the point in Critter format where that's happening. Although there still are some wild decks running around in Critter format that I feel like the meta has not gotten a good grasp on, like Labyrinth Turbo. That's a deck that people have doubted for quite some time, but it did win the last event. And the question is that because of the Labyrinth stuff? Is it because of just playing multiple Cannon Soldiers? And if it's because of playing multiple Cannon Soldiers, is that something that other decks should be emulating? Or should other decks be cutting things like Solemn? Like, there's a lot of different things that you can sort of consider when going for this sort of thing. Dark Hole on a lone set is always unfortunate. It could be like Sangan or Witch, but it looks like Magic Jammer is going to come down, pitch a Thunder Dragon, so maybe that is a pretty valuable set there. It might be a Magician of Faith to grab back something else, although there are no spells in Dump Truck's graveyard, so that makes it less likely that it's Magician of Faith. Could be like a Mass Sorcerer, honestly. Could also be a Giant Soldier Stone, but Regeki coming down here as well. Dump Truck thinking about that and going for Solemn on that. Oh my word. I mean, yeah, Falco also is the pilot of Labyrinthine Turbo, who's a very, very good duelist in these retro formats. But I do think that even with a good duelist piloting a deck, you always have to wonder, like, is it the duelist or the deck? Is there merit to the deck itself? And consider, what you can do with that. So a Logins coming down here, going to attack in for 18. And is that going to be all? That's going to be all. Yeah, I mean, all the board clears from Wagmuffin's side have been used up. So you don't really need to worry about that. But it's very interesting what that set might be. I wonder if it could be a Sangan or Witch, honestly. And Dump Truck just holding it because, like, there's such low life that if it was destroyed, Wagmuffin could potentially get in for a lot of damage. But Wagmuffin drawing into a Thunder Dragon this turn, and that's one of the downsides of Thunder Dragon in this format. Unlike in a format like GOAT format, you can't really use Thunder Dragons in Grave for any value. So, like, it's kind of an awkward card. It is for deck thinning. There are some things that you can use to pitch it with, like Magic Jammers, as we've seen Dump Truck play, or card destruction, like we've seen Wagmuffin play. But it is a bit trickier to use, and it does lead to turns like this where you pitch it, and then that's just your turn because you didn't draw anything valuable, right? You just drew a card that basically deck thins for you, which is valuable later, but it's not instantly valuable, And tempo does matter in this format quite a bit. It's not, I think, completely centralized around tempo. Like, if you want a format like that, look at like Vampire format, which is a format later in the DM era where it's basically all about tempo. But I do think that Critter does have that element to it because honestly, I think most parts of the game, you would say that Critter has that element to it because, like, it's got the grind your control stuff. It's got the tempo-oriented stuff. It's got, like, knowing when to hold your cards versus playing them, right? Especially when it comes to the power cards. It's got, like, reading your opponent's cards. It's got, bluffing. It's got all these different things that are really important to pick up just if you want to get better at the game in general. So I do think that, like, just grinding out Critter, playing a lot of Critter will make you really good at whatever format you pick up. I'll say one of the things it sort of lacks is side decking. Side decking, there is that to an extent, right? Like, if you're up against a deck that's playing a lot of Cannon Soldiers, maybe you cut some Solemn Judgments or things like that, or plan accordingly. But I will say there's not as many, like, Silver Bullets as there will be in later formats. And so side decking, I think, is one of the things that, like, drastically changes over the course of the game's history. And this format, there isn't really as much as you can do with that. So I guess that's, like, the one aspect that it's not really teaching you as well as other formats might. But there is still that aspect. Like, you do need to know how to side deck. Like, it will help you win games if you side deck well in this format. It is very tough to know exactly how to side deck. but there are counters to various things, and especially like Exodia. Like that has some silver bullets, I guess. Well, like if you're not playing like your Robin Goblins or your White Magical Hats or your card destruction in the main, maybe you bring them in from the side. Or you don't because you figure your opponent's going for a smokescreen strat. But there's the Horn of Heaven that I mentioned earlier. Going for that, tributing the Mass Sorcerer to stop the summon of the Giant Soldier of Stone. Figuring like, I don't want to take that damage and make myself dead to if they manage to somehow revive a Cannon Soldier. So I think that is smart. It's basically trap hole. You're losing the Master Sorcerer anyways. But a 7 Tools of the Bandit is going to come down and stop that. Very interesting, because that would mean that Wagmuffin has potentially some way to leverage that Giant Soldier of Stone and potentially kill here. But it looks like 7 Tools is going to come down from Dump Truck as well. Oh, that's going to be very interesting as well. So that Giant Soldier of Stone will fall. And now Wagmuffin is potentially at a point where they're losing here, depending on what they have. Like, do they have back row to set to potentially stop a game shot here from Dump Truck? If they don't, then this might be all over. Lodge in attacking in, and that will indeed poke through. I mean, Dump Truck knew that there were 2 dead Thunder Dragons in hand. They didn't know the remaining 2. But yeah, very interesting stuff here. Very interesting game 3. Good stuff indeed. I'm just going to check the replay real quick because I do want to know what that, what the final card Dump Truck had set there, the monster. I'm just curious about that. But yeah, as PJ says as well, they feel that side decking is more to counter the player as opposed to the deck, which I do agree with. I think there is that element to it, you know. And that can be a bit different than it will be in later formats. I mean, you could argue that you can still do that in later formats, but I do think that it is definitely more so here. And also, like, whether you're going first or second, that can matter as well. Although that also comes up in later formats. But yeah, was it a Magician of Faith set? It might have just been a Magician of Faith set here. Looking like it might have been the Magician of Faith set, even with no spells in grave. But yeah, very interesting stuff here. I'm just watching this back to see what the set was. But yeah, a lot of damage going through. And yeah, it is indeed the Magician of Faith. Yeah, they're holding on to that Magician of Faith there, even though no spells. So that's very interesting that they would do that. I guess they're saving it to treat for Horn of Heaven as well. But yeah, very good stuff. Anyways, let's dive into the other game going on here, which will be Soul versus Hylian here. Looks like that is still going on. Yeah, I will say, you know, as PJ says, at least going second here is not as egregious compared to the other DM formats with hand rips and whatnot. And yeah, this is before hand rips like Comfy, Forceful, and Duo exist. Now, I do think that you can argue that they have a place in a format like this because they cut off the advantage train that like Sangan, Witch, all that stuff actually provides you. So you could argue that it's a good thing to have those in the format. I feel like most people, though, do not agree with that sentiment and do not like the hand rips at all. And I can't blame them for that as well. So, oh no, it seems like Hylian had a perfect field and lost it to something here. To a Mirror Force. Oof. Yeah, that is rough. That does happen sometimes, though. I mirror something that you got to play around, and unfortunately, it can definitely ruin your day. And it looks like it ruined Hylian's day here, unfortunately. But yeah, there's always a chance, and 8,000 life points is definitely something that you can work from. Sold at 5,300, but they might have the tools to come back here and kill Hylian. We'll have to see. But yeah, it seems like they had a Muka and maybe a Cannon Soldier that got blown up by the Mirror Force, but I do think that there will be some new decks and innovation, because I do feel like, maybe not in this locals, right? Because this locals, it's a small event, so only like 5 people signed up. I'm not sure if they're going to have like the craziest things going on. But I do think the format as a whole, there's a lot of room for that, right? We've seen that in past tournaments too. Like, I feel like people just view this as a format where like, oh, you know, like it's old Yu-Gi-Oh! There's not really much of the card pool, so how much can you do? But then, like, the last tournament, Labyrinth Tank Turbo won, cementing it as a deck that, like, people have to respect in some capacity, right? Even though it's been around for a while. It's like, damn, that is something we actually have to consider in play around, right? Exodia won a tournament once, and no one expected that until it did it. Horn of Heaven being good is something that no one was expecting. Robin Goblin being as good as it is as well. Like, there's a lot of different things that people are really, like, cooking with, tinkering with. And I do think that the format is actually changing quite a bit over the years and with further exploration. So I think it is definitely a format that can just continue to grow. Of course, there will be like a cap to that progress at some point. Like if you look at something like Yu-Gi Kaiba format, where I know that they're still having tournaments for that, but I do feel like that format has sort of not grown beyond where it was, partially because the people who play it now don't play Stallmill. And I do think Stallmill is a very, very good deck. But people just don't like to play it. So it's sort of like a weird situation where, like, if people do, like, I'm not saying people have to play that in a format, but like, it is kind of weird that, like, there is a deck that generally is viewed as a very good deck that no one's playing, and it makes it a weird dynamic in the tournaments, to be sure. But like, I'm not sure if that's going to see much, if Yu-Gi Hype can actually see many more innovations as it is now. And that's just my thoughts on it. I don't play Yu-Gi Hype as much as I did, so people in the Yu-Gi Hype community can let me know if they think that there will be some more or not. But I feel like the format never really... well, that's not quite true. I think the format did evolve around Stallmill with the heavier Tribute Soul control strategies. But I do think that, like, then because people stopped playing Stallmill, then it made it kind of a weird situation. But I don't know. Maybe we'll do Yu-Gi Hype locals at some point and see what people bring to that. But Stallmill makes that kind of a nightmare to stream. So it's just kind of a rough one. But if I had time to play in Yu-Gi Hype tournaments, I would bring Stallmill. I would be a terrorist, and just bring the deck that everyone hates. Okay, Witch of Black Forest attacking in for 1100. Drop them down to 4700. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that it still survived. Like, I'm never rooting for the downfall of a format, right? Like, even if I don't necessarily like the format as much as other people, I never want a format to fail. I feel like that's something that has unfortunately struck a lot of the retro community, where, like, there are people who are just like, yeah, I want my format to succeed, and I want the other formats to fail so that my format can succeed. And that's just generally not how I think people should go about it. But, like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just happy as long as many formats as people enjoy are, getting enjoyed. I feel like a rising tide raises all ships. The more people are playing retro Yu-Gi-Oh, that's just a good thing in general. So, I mean, that's just my thoughts on it. Polymerization here to go for a twin head, and now a cannon soldier coming down. That will indeed be the end of the game. Even through, well, not quite through Karibo, because you can Karibo the twin head attack, but yeah, it looks like double Thundra in hand, and then a Fisher there as well. So yeah, it seems like Soul winning over Hylian there. So they're going to go on to face Jim Bob here. Let me fill in this. So Dump Truck is going to be in the finals here. They're going to face off against the winner of Soul and Jim Bob here. So we're actually moving pretty quickly through this locals here today, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, because current format games can be a bit of a grind, but a good grind, not like a bad one, but it just takes a bit sometimes to actually, get through some games. But let's see. Looks like Jim Bob is hosting for Soul. Looks like that game is going on now, so let's dive into that one. Jim Bob versus Soul here. That was fun. I'm glad you could join Bottom Barrel Budget Films. It's been a while since you were able to join a local, so I'm happy that you had fun and were able to join it. We'll see what the next week's locals are as well. So, it's a good grind like me and you're redacted. Yeah, that is a pretty good grind right there. So I've been told. I listen. I know that some people find jokes like that immature. I am a child at heart. I mean, listen, I've got a Yu-Gi-Oh YouTube channel. What do you expect? So I always enjoy jokes like that, even if some people find them not as fun. I'm a big fan. I'm a connoisseur of jokes like that, and that was definitely a good one. Anyway, Soul just setting here, passing back to Jim Bob. Kind of a rough start for Soul. Muka getting flipped up. That's going to be a big Muka, so that's going to be 2400 attack on that Muka, poking in. It will indeed go through. And let's see what they do. Main 2. They're going to set 1, pass back. Bottom Matter of Budget Film says, at age 22, I found those jokes immature. At age 32, I find them big brain. Yeah, they age like fine wine, I think, honestly. They get better with age. Maybe they get better with age because the parents grow older as well. So, so all the Yo Mama jokes have that extra layer to them, Lodgin coming down, so Fisher's probably not long to follow. There's a Fisher, and that will indeed go through. Lodging attacking in for 18. That will indeed go through as well. And Soul is going to, are they going to set? Are they going to pass? They're just going to pass back. What is Jim Bob going to do here? They're going to go for a Mass Sorcerer. That is scary. Just seeing your opponent like raw dog out a Mass Sorcerer. Be like, yeah, I'm normal summoning this. What are you going to do about it? And then a Fisher coming down, poking in for 900. I think honestly in that case though, I would have gone Fisher then summon Mass Sorcerer, because you're not baiting out a Trap Hole. You're just baiting out like, you know, a Solemn at that point, because that's the only thing that can hit Mass Sorcerer besides the Horn of Heaven. And if your opponent wants to Horn of Heaven a Mass Sorcerer, maybe you're fine with that trade, but I would still probably want a Fisher first. And if your opponent doesn't negate the Fisher, then you're kind of screwed if you don't avoid Protect the Mass Sorcerer. So I think, I mean, it's fine overall. It worked out. And Soul did not have the piece that they needed to stop that, but I think I would have done Fisher then Mass Sorcerer as opposed to the other way around. PJ Arthur Dragon says, yo, Mama's so dumb, she dark bribed a Jar of Greed. That would be quite a turn of events there. Dark bribing a Jar of Greed. Oof. That'd be sad. Raigeki a Mass Sorcerer is also a bit unfortunate here for Soul. Oh, you never want to do that, but sometimes you have to. Jim Bob following up with a set of their own. I would guess that Soul set is a Magician of Faith that they can use to get back that Raigeki there if they want to, but we'll have to see if that is actually the case. Bottom Barrel Blooded Film says, you know what they call a gin in Paris? A beat stick with 1800. Because of the metric format, they don't use the YK system. Yeah, it's sad when you know, we have to go over to countries that use the metric system. Ugh. Scary, scary stuff. Meters? Ugh, what's that? Liters? What are those? Why do they rhyme? You know, feet and gallons don't rhyme. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Pot of Greed coming down, drawing 2. So Jim Bob in a very good spot here. So Val Chapo says, how is Robin Goblin so underplayed? It legit makes all beat sticks as Don's lose. I think it is getting played more in these formats. I think the big thing is you don't want to double stack on Robin Goblins potentially. But like, I think it's a very good card. You just don't necessarily play 3 of it because it can break in multiples. But it is very good. Like, it's basically a guaranteed 1-for-1 trade at the very least, because they either use spell and trap removal on it, which is clearing a card, or, you know, you get in for a hand rip and then they clear it afterwards, which actually makes it a 2-for-1. So like you're getting a lot of value off it. So I think decks are playing it more now. It just kind of like, I think the ratios are still getting worked out. But yeah, definitely a good card in this format. Definitely underrated in my opinion. CS says, I think I cooked with Chimera Tech and Wind. Wind would be cool to see in Chimera Tech. I don't think necessarily there's like, the issue with Wind in Chimera Tech is I don't think it has like a raison d'etre. I don't know French, but like, you know, the reason for being. So it's like why play Wind over something else is the question that you have to ask yourself there. And it's like, I think Icarus could maybe be an answer, but Icarus is still kind of a weird one because like a lot of times a 2-for-2 trade, you can make it into a 3-for-2 trade, but it can be a bit awkward. And I feel like a lot of Chimera Tech decks don't really like play into it in a way that would be a 3-for-2 trade. So it's like kind of weird there. When the Lightsworn format tournament is probably going to be next month. So yeah, I think I should be on track to have Lightsworn format, you know, at least a guide out by the time we would start a Lightsworn monthly next month. So stay tuned for that on the Discord server. I will be announcing that at some point. But next week, locals will be in one of these formats that we got here. So speaking of discarding, like Robin Goblin, we got White Magical Hat coming down. That's going to poke in for 1,000 there. Rip a card out of the hand. What's it going to rip? And also against Soul Stack, this could be potentially backbreaking. If you hit a Thunder Dragon, generally, if you hit that, like you're like, darn, I missed. But against Soul Stack, it actually is a very good piece because it does make Polymerization a lot more dead. Yeah. I mean, you can boost attack stats with Rising Air Currents, but there are other things in Chimera Tech that can boost the attack stat of your monsters, right? Like, it's just like, I'm not sure if Wind can really do as much as other decks. But, I mean, I'm happy that you're experimenting with it. Like, definitely continue to cook. And I'm happy to be proven wrong with this. It's just I'm not convinced right now that it will necessarily be able to do much. I love Treasure Format. I would love Treasure Format to rise again, and it definitely could. I think Treasure Format has a similar audience to Critter Format, except with Treasure Format, I think it's just there's more jank stuff you can do. Not to say that there isn't jank stuff you can do in Critter. 7 tools on the Woboku there. Soul dropping down relatively low. That does clear the white magical hat. It's just they're in a very, very risky spot now. But maybe you got to do that before Jim Bob's able to actually, win. A witch coming down for Jim Bob here, and that's going to be fine by Soul. Fisher on that witch. That's going to get met with a solemn judgment. But then Raigeki's going to come down, and that will be the end of the game. So, yeah, that is rough. I feel like Garuda isn't really necessarily needed to be played in Wind and Chimera Tech. I feel like you just go Sylpheed or bust, because like Sylpheed actually has an effect that you're going to pull off, whereas Garuda doesn't necessarily have a good effect. 4-star could definitely be a good side deck tech. I wouldn't play in the main because there are decks like Monarchs, which 4-star against Monarchs is just brutal. But also you gotta ask yourself, like, what are you using 4-star for in the Wind deck? Like, why are you playing that over other things that can potentially host those decks more, right? Are you just playing it because of Wind? Because you're not attacking in with 4-star, right? So you're just pairing with Miyabi. Because you can't pair with Icarus because it's not a winged beast. So you'd have to pair with Miyabi. But like, if that happens, what you're banking on is that your 4-star will survive a turn, which is unlikely. And that you'll then be able to tribute it after, right? So it's just kind of like I don't know. It just feels kind of weird to play that over other things. Like I understand kill spies, tomatoes, turtles, all that stuff, but like it's just not really like you could just play a different thing to deal with those instead, right? As opposed to 4-star, because it doesn't necessarily fit. Like it is Wind, so there's a flavor of it there, but like why are you playing that in? Like, what does it actually do for the deck compared to some other things you could play instead, right? Like Wangu's probably better than 4-star there, even though it is not a Wind. It stops tomatoes, turtles, rats, spies, right? It stops all those. It does it oftentimes more efficiently, and with less counterplay a lot of the times. And I mean, it's just a better card, right, on its own. So it's like that's the issue that you come to when you build jank in some of these formats. Where like I'm all for building jank, but I generally like it. For me, I need a purpose to build it, right? I guess it is fuel for the Wind banish monsters, but like I feel like you have enough fuel. Like whenever I play Wind decks, I'm not like, oh damn, I need more Wind fuel in the grave, Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the Critter locals bottom barrel budget films. Listen, we all get whooped in round one occasionally. It happens, right? But yeah, the metagame is definitely one of the more elusive aspects of the format, especially because it changes with each tournament. It's a very small community that plays Critter format. So that community is in tune to what is going on when the tournament wraps up. And the tournaments are also pretty small, so it's tough to really know what from that tournament is signal and what's noise. So it's a bit tricky. Heavy going to clear that back row there, which means that Soul might have a big play to make. Jim Bob is a bit down on cards. Jirai Gumo coming down, so that is able to get over the lodge-in here at the potential cost of half Soul's life. Let's see if that actually goes through. It looks like that will indeed have Soul's life points there, down to 3,100. Not necessarily the spot you want to be in, especially against a deck that might have changed of heart. But Swords will indeed insulate against that. No Heavy's been used from Jim Bob here. Heavy would be pretty good here. But they do have weight. Oh, there's the Heavy. We'll both be getting chained, so that means that Soul will not be able to take damage this turn from battle. But it still might not be the best for them here. Bottom Barrel Budget Film says, only metagames I understand are Goat Format, Pokemon Pocket, speedruns for ALTTP, Mega Man 2, and OOT. So OOT is Ocarina of Time. ALTTP, I'm trying to think what that could be. I don't think it's a Zelda game. What could it be? ALTTP. All lattes taste too personal. A Link to the Past. Okay, that makes sense. There is a Zelda game then. Yeah, I need to get into Zelda. I haven't really played much. But it seemed like a fun franchise, for sure. It looks like they're not going to attack in here with the Gumo. Is that going to be it? Might be it. Main 2, what are they going to do? Are they going to commit another back row? I feel like I'd be a bit scared here if I was Soul and I didn't commit a back row. But I don't know. They are going to set a back row. They're probably deciding which one. Or maybe to set 2. They're just going to set the 1 pass. All lattes taste too personal is my favorite of the modern Zelda games. The tutorial was way too slow, but I like fighting the bosses. Yeah, I think some of the bosses are really good. Like Burnt Cappuccino. That one, oh, it's just so good. Especially the ending cutscene of it. Where it really dives into all your X's. Like that is very, very just chef's kiss. Very, very good stuff. They don't make video games like that anymore, really. It's a modern Zelda game, but even so, they don't make video games like that anymore. But yeah, Jim Bob just poking in there, getting in damage, so they can cut Soul down a bit. I wonder if Jim Bob has something like a change of heart or things like that to actually deal with the Gumo and potentially get in for lethal. Because they did do the heavy storm earlier. It could have been to bait out something like a Waboku. Could have just been to clear the swords. But I think they do have something here to stop what's going on. This whole thing about that witch search, what will they search with the witch? A lot of good options for them, depending on what they've got. They could just search out a Witch or Sangan, which is the classic play. They could search out Lady Thunder Dragon to get more Thunder Dragons in hand to go for a poly play. A lot of different options here that they could go for. Yeah, they're thinking. They're going to search a Sangan. I think that is a safer play here. So I think that makes sense. Jim Bob's setting 1 passing back. I mean, 1 heavy has been used by Soul already. So what are the odds they've got a second? 1 heavy has been used by Jim Bob as well. And there's the Thundra. So it seems like they're rewarded for not searching out Thundra. And, I mean, listen, I personally am not a fan of searching out Thundra off Witch. I understand why you do it, but I've just been burned too many times in the past by searching out that and then drawing into the other Thundra. Heavy coming down, so that will clear away both back row there. Waboku will get chained to that. But Jim Bob will also lose Solemn. Bottom arrow budget film says Jim can come back if Gumo kills Soul's life points to a point of a Fisher giving a 1-shot, which I think is part of what Jim Bob's hoping for. I think that they might have like Chain of Heart or something, that they've been holding it just in case. It looks like they're just going to attack into the set with the Lodge in there, hitting a Magician of Faith, which will get back its spell. Which spell is Soul going to get? I think Swords could be a good one, honestly, just stalling out the game a bit more. Pot is obviously a good one as well. Depends on what they're trying to go for here. There's a potential lethal line you can do if you get back Pot and you draw into Change of Heart, plus like a Cannon Soldier. Change of Heart, Cannon Soldier is lethal if it all goes through. The big thing there is if it all goes through. So there is the argument to get back Swords instead, which I personally would probably get back Swords because I'm a bit more of a conservative player. I don't necessarily take as many risks as I maybe possibly should. Jim Bob's setting a monster into that known Swords, so I'm curious to see what that monster is. Swords getting flipped up here. Gonna flip up a Sangan there, so maybe Jim Bob was hoping for a Chain of Heart first or something like that. But yeah, Sangan will be there to protect Jim Bob's life points a little bit more. And Jurgen was going to attack over that Lodge in. So we're going to call Tails again. Will Tails never fail? Or will it fail for them? We'll have to see. It looks like it did fail for them again, unfortunately. So we'll go down to 1,200. Bottom barrel budget film says the answer is always Pot of Greed unless niche strat. Always get Pot of Greed. I do think that there is some nuance here. Depends on what Soul's got and how much defensive layers they've got. Especially when they're so low on life. I think Sword is a defendable one to get because it buys you 3 turns as opposed to drawing 2, right? Especially if Jim Bob does not have that heavy storm. But it can be a bit tricky because, you know, you don't necessarily close out the game as much here. And Soul is running very low. So they're potentially running to the point where they drop down to where Cannon Soldier can kill them. But we'll have to see exactly what happens here. Soul setting 1 and passing back. Jim Bob probably hoping no Change of Heart. Which I would assume that Soul did not have Change of Heart because I personally would have changed Heart the set before going for Swords. But maybe it's just like, maybe it was too obvious a bluff on Jim Bob's part. I don't know. But maybe I'm just bad at calling bluffs or not calling bluffs. Of course, this set here could be a bluff as well. Swift Birdman Joe could be funny in the win deck. It could. I don't know if it's necessarily good to have it, but it could be funny. Did that one weird card, Jigan Bakuyan or whatever it was called, have any practical use, or was that just anime hype? Just anime hype, unfortunately. It takes way too long to actually use. Its effect is not really that good. So, yeah, it's just kind of an unfortunate card all around. Yeah, so nothing you can really do with it. I mean, maybe someone cooked up something with it, and maybe we're just all wrong about it. But like, right now, it's just it's just really bad, really, really not good right now in the metagame. Yeah, it's very cool that like I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that's like built around playing a bunch of boss monsters. Um, but I feel like in the game itself, you don't actually play too many, which is very interesting. It'll depend on the deck you play, of course, but for a lot of these old formats, you don't actually play a quote unquote boss monster. You just play a bunch of good stuff together that synergize well. And so it's kind of neat. But Tails is going to get called by Soul here. Losing the coin toss yet again. Not good for them. But that same game will poke in for 1,000. Cannon on the field here. So the question is, will this be able to kill? I don't quite know, but it will be able to tribute off the Sangan here to get a search. Maybe for a Karibo, maybe not. And poke Jim Bob down by 500. What are they going to search? I don't know if they're necessarily a good search to get here now. Yeah, I mean, the anime hype, yeah, as you say, it's all based around storytelling. So, like, you know, there's a big, like, you know, arc of, like, building to the boss monster, right? That's the climax of the boss monster. But you don't have that arc in a regular game because it's not a story, it's a game. You know, you're trying to move your pieces optimally, and optimality doesn't necessarily conform to story structure. I feel like some of the best games out there are ones that, you know, it actually does turn out where, like, you know, you're put through the ropes and you're trying to draw into the perfect thing that you need for the climax. So that can be fun, but I feel like very rarely, I mean, not very rarely, it depends on the format, but a lot of formats, you know, it doesn't turn out that way. Anywho, Jim Bob in a pretty prickly spot. Maybe not as prickly as Soul, but definitely a spot to be in. Curious what they do here. Raigeki on the Gumo. So that's going to get through there. Cannon Soldier coming down. And they are going to use Prio there. I wonder if they had that or not. Before getting back the Geki. Will's going to be pretty good here if it's uncontested. If it is uncontested, that's the end of the game. Solemn coming down. And yeah, so that will be not quite the end of the game. But another Will set there. Oh my word. Yep, that's going to do it. That is going to do it. Yeah, so that other will bring out a Cannon Soldier and close out the game. If Jim Bob has a Cannon Soldier, they might not. They might not have a Cannon Soldier. And if they don't, then it will not be the end of the game, but it will be pretty darn close. There's a witch, so it's not a Cannon Soldier. Hold up. Okay, we're still in it. We are still in it. I maybe would have held off on Prio here, if that's the case. Because, so the reason I would have held off on Prio is, like, I guess they could have Solemn on, well, if they Solemn your thing, then it's already Solemn, right? So you don't need to worry about that if it's Solemned. But if the summon's not negated, then Trap Hole just plays into the wills already. So, like, you're not really in a bad spot. Soul still has life points left, but they're going to have life points anyways from this play, right? You're not killing them. So I feel like you just go for this, potentially wind up in a point where, or no, actually you need to tribute for the will. So actually, no, it doesn't. I guess it's a wash either way. Yeah, but Gumo and then a Reborn, so that will indeed be the end of the game. So yeah, if Jimbo was playing another Cannon Soldier in the deck, then that would have been lethal there, but unfortunately for them, it was not. So that's going to do it for that game there. Good game 2 indeed. This is why, you know, I think having multiple Cannon Soldiers is pretty good if you play multiple Last Will. But I do understand it as just a searchable thing to get back when you need it. But yeah, it can be a bit awkward there. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough. Bottom Barrel Budget Films says, most anime hype BS I ever got was getting to table 1 for the final match and go with locals by drawing BLS when 100 life points using Solemn Judgment on a negate and hitting for a game with him. That is always very fun when you get by on the skin of your teeth I think there's a game on the channel in like Yu-Gi Kaiba format where I like survive with 50 life points and I actually managed to win from that. Um, which I think was just super hype. Like it was a crazy game. That was back when like I just dove into like every single aspect of a format. Like I did so many Yu-Gi Kaiba videos because basically I was like, oh well, you need to know like if Castle Walls is something that you can use or whatever. And it's like, no, you probably don't. You know, I can sum that up in like a sentence. But I was very maximalist at that point in time when it came to these formats. But now I just sort of go through a bit quicker. But I miss some aspects of doing it like that. But I think as the formats grow and as you get a bigger card pool, I think you get diminishing returns on that. Like just more and more diminishing. Um, because like for instance, when I'm in cat format right now, I could just make a Kohimeru deck right now in this format and show it off. But like, is that going to tell anything valuable? It's a not a good deck, right? Like it's just going to fail into the best decks in the format, and it's just gonna kind of be a waste of time, I think. So that's generally why I don't do that. If you really want me to, I can switch it up and try and do all those sorts of videos. But I just found it to be like a drain on my time and energy because like when I make a deck, I want to make it like somewhat viable, and if I'm working on a deck that I feel like cannot be viable, it really does take a toll because I'm just like, I have no idea what to do with this thing. I'm banging my head against a wall. I can't, I just can't make progress on it, So for me, I just try and focus on decks that I think have some redeeming quality to them that can actually be put forth to win a game potentially in a unique way. But not every deck can do that. I will have some more cat format decks that will not be meta. Like for the record, this isn't about like meta or not meta. This is about like whether I think something is actually viable or not, right? And viability can be something that you can play at tier 2, or maybe even rogue, but it does involve having a game plan and a game plan that's unique from other decks in the format, that it does better than other decks in the format in that capacity. So like for instance, one deck that I'm thinking about doing is like plants, because plants have the ability to abuse card safe return a bit more than other decks do in the format, except for like zombies maybe, but like plants are more interesting in my opinion. And what you can do with plants is like you can just set up Amaryllis and just keep bringing back Amaryllis with card safe return up and just draw a ton of cards. So that just seemed fun, and it seems like a unique build of the deck. I think it will be pretty cool. You don't have a Gigaplant stuff yet, but I do think that it will be a neat deck to show off. And so did bring it to locals, and it was hyped there, so I figure it could be hyped to show off on the channel proper. But yeah, I just need to build that and then get into the game there. Heavy coming down. That is a big, big heavy. Jim Bob thinking here. They're going to Solemn this. I actually don't know if you Solemn the heavy there. Potentially. Huh. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the back row is, I guess. But, like, that potentially puts you in a really bad spot. But it looks like that will indeed go through. I mean, to be fair, if the heavy goes through, you're potentially in a really bad spot. So, maybe that's why you should go for the Solemn. Trap hole on Legend there. That's going to go through. Last Will after that, so that's going to get a pretty good monster here for Soul, potentially. Witch coming down. Which is which? Flipping up a Gigatech Wolf. So it seems like this is the full Labyrinth Tank Turbo style of deck. Raigeki coming down as well. Clearing a Giant Soldier and a Witch, so that Witch will get a search here. For another monster. Do I ever collect any cards? I don't generally collect, and the reason for that is like I don't have many IRL friends close to me who actually play the game in person. So for me, there isn't necessarily as much reason to collect. Theoretically, like conceptually, I'm like, yeah, I would like to have a collection, because this was a big part of my childhood. Like I like actually having the cards to like play around with. But then monetarily, my wallet's like, maybe you shouldn't. And so I don't have a collection right now, but if I ever get friends in my area who play it in person, then I'll definitely try and build one out, because I think it would be fun to play with people IRL. It's just none of my IRL friends really play, which is part of why I made the channel, because I was like, yeah, I want to play games in these formats with people, but I don't have anyone actually in my life to really play that with. So I'm gonna go on the internet and search for people and try and share this experience with them. I think it's been really fun. We actually made a really good community. We also have 2K subscribers, which is crazy. I mean, we've sort of like stagnated at the 2K or at the 1900 mark because I haven't really been making as many videos as I used to. But it's still really cool that we built up a big community here. And so yeah, I still view this as a great thing. But yeah, so not right now for the collection, but I do still have my cards from way back when, so that's fun. But I don't unfortunately have the funds to necessarily collect as much as I would like to. Yeah, but I always love seeing people's collections as well. It's always very cool when I can see that and be like, "Yo, that's sick." They have those. So I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh collections are like more fun to look through for me than like you look at like other card games, right? Like Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering card collections, they're like so sweaty. Like it's funny because like people complain sometimes about like people being super competitive and like the games and stuff, and why can't we play more casually and stuff. I feel like Magic the Gathering does that for card collection, where like people are like, oh yeah, here's my vintage Black Lotus and like yada yada yada, and it's just like, oh my goodness, that this is like this is a college fund right here in this binder. It's like I can't match that. But yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you used it to build up the old collection because, I like that people are using this channel like to help out their own life. It's like I make this channel mainly for actually like education or just enrichment or like just to get people to get stuff out of it. I'm not doing it for like myself or like the money or to do it as a career or something. I'm just doing it for people to enjoy it and actually get value out of it. So I'm really happy that you're actually using it to go back, see cards that like you might want to add to your collection, and doing it. And so yeah, I'm happy about that. Yeah. So that's why I'm never really gonna I don't have any plans to necessarily like stop making videos or doing these streams. Even though, I've been going slower lately and I don't know if I'm gonna reach the rate that I was going at like back like in my prime, but I do have no plans right now of like stopping the channel, because I feel like it's a fun thing I can do for the community. I like the community a lot. I like the game a lot. I just want to do something nice for people. So this is my way of doing that. So yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad that you enjoy it and are able to use it for something productive. Even though your wallet might not be thanking me, I apologize for that. But as long as you're getting enjoyment out of what you're buying, I think that's what matters, right? There's the saying, you can't take it with you, and I think that's very true. Yeah, at the end of the day, do what makes you happy, and that's all you can do in life, I think. But anyways, Legend coming down with a back row there. And Dump Truck is going to reciprocate with a T set. Are they going to do an L set or just a T? Looks like a T set there and pass. And they're going to pass back to Soul. What's Soul going to do here? Can they push through that back? Not necessarily back row, but the monster? Or is it something like a giant soldier? Do you attack into something like a giant soldier when there could potentially be a Robin Goblin there? Could be a Muka as well, but Muka would not have enough defense to ward off the Lajin right now, so probably isn't the Muka. But what are they going to do? They're just going to attack in. I think that makes sense. See what it is. Can't be Magician of Faith. I mean, it could, but it's very unlikely. Is a Witch there, so Witch going to get a search for a Sangan. The classic resource train going. So yeah, Sundervale Sheppa says, would be cool if you still made new decks from old formats that have already passed, but hard to make new decks. Yeah, it's a couple things. One, it's hard to make new decks, and two, like, I want to maintain the forward momentum of the channel as well, because I want to keep holding monthlies and new tournaments, or new formats, that is. And because, like, I've always viewed the purpose of this channel to be, like, sort of going for breadth and not depth. So like the idea is that we go through all the different formats, we find ones that are potentially hidden gems, and then we either like promote those hidden gems or like just by the act of covering it on the channel, that gets to people who can really vibe with it and like really engage with it further and hopefully grow it further. Um, and just sort of spread the word about it as we continue to go on and like discover new formats. So that's sort of like been the intention of the channel, but it is kind of something that I've tried to balance in the past where like I feel bad like if you get into my channel because like you watch like my critter videos, right? And you're like, oh man, the critter videos were so good. I love critter so much. I'm gonna keep watching this guy. And then I go into treasure format, and then I go into like imperial format, and so on and so forth, right? And now I'm like in the 5Ds era, and you signed on in the DM era, and you're like, well, I didn't sign up for this. I wanted to watch more critter gameplay. Like he's just making videos with like synchro monsters now. I don't want to see that, right? So I do feel bad if like that is sort of like someone out there who feels maybe betrayed by my content, feels maybe like, you know, they're not enjoying it anymore because it's just not for them. But like, I mean, that's always sort of been the mission of my channel to do that sort of thing. And there's only so much time I have to make videos, right? And so I'm generally going to prioritize videos that cover like newer stuff rather than the older stuff. Not to say I'll never do it. I have gone back when there's been a particularly cool innovation or deck and sort of made a video on it. But it is definitely rarer than I would potentially like, or my audience would potentially like as well. But yeah, I mean, I always say for people, let me know if you want more videos like that, and I'll try to make it happen, but it's not a guarantee. It really depends on how much time I have to do it. But yeah, I mean, I hope that other people also are inspired to go back and look at these old formats and hopefully make new decks and like continue to innovate more. Yeah. It seems like that was a rough brick for Dump Truck there. But that does happen sometimes in this format. Sometimes you brick on monsters, sometimes you brick on everything else. That can be a bit awkward. Unlike other formats, there are a lot of, or I guess there are not a lot of ways to actually unbrick yourself as much besides like Sangan and Witch, which is kind of wild because like if you get into a Sangan or Witch, you're like fine generally in terms of bricking a lot of the times. Not always, but like, you know, a lot of times you're okay. And because Sangan and Witch exists at 4 copies, you just kind of like you expect to just filter through your deck so much, but in actuality, there's like a lot of bricking that can occur, especially if you don't draw into those, or if your opponent manages to somehow like get around those effects. They can be very awkward. But yeah, it's sort of like something that happens in a lot of formats, right? Like, most formats that I cover on the channel are not like hyper consistent, right? Their decks can't like filter through their entire thing until like get to something they want, and if they do, they're generally viewed poorly because they become like tier 0 decks in some formats, and they can be a bit not fun for some people, even though they're fun for others. So yeah, it's like a trade-off for those different style of decks. And when it comes to retro Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of people get into it for the slower gameplay, and those hyper consistent decks aren't necessarily geared toward providing that experience. But if you like it though, then it is something fun. So Chapo says, like, teach me how to cook video that Fraser does, where there's a new deck that tops from older formats, and he tests it out for the viewers, but the older formats are not too much variance. That is something that I will potentially do. And also, I really like Fraser's content, by the way. He's a very, very good retro YouTuber. And so I think that is a very fun series as well. But hopefully, I'm planning when I get to Edison format to collab with a bunch of Edison content creators. So hopefully I'll be able to collab with him as well and make a video where maybe he can teach me how to cook a bit. But yeah, so that is something that I've considered as well. And there have been some other decks in older formats that have been pretty interesting. Like in Perfect Circle, there was recently, like I say recently, I think this was like a month ago, back when I was like really busy, where someone topped with like a Winds deck, which is really neat. So I might try and focus on that. But yeah, it's about the timing for me, right? Like, and again, it's like I'm already very far behind on like the formats that I need to cover, like Cat Format, for instance. I feel like I'm far behind on. Although now that I've taken this month to do Chimera Tech, then maybe there actually is more time. So I will potentially try it out. And Madcap, they mentioned that the Wind deck was nuts. So maybe, maybe I do have to try that. So maybe I'll try out some of the older decks that have topped recently. So yeah, that'll probably be what I'll do then. So yeah, I'll make a video like that. That'll be fun. And it'll be a good throwback to some of the older stuff. And it'll also allow me to make like more videos, because sometimes like when I'm making a video like for cat format, which hasn't really had many events and don't really have many deck lists out there, right? I kind of have to build some decks from scratch. And at least this is something that like I don't need to build a deck for. I can just be like, okay, I'm going to use this deck list and play it out and see how it goes. So yeah, so I'll make a video for that one. So that'll be my next video probably. Gives me more time to construct some of the cat decks that I want to make videos on this upcoming week. So yeah, good idea. So thank you for the feedback on that and the suggestion. So hopefully that'll be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I can do it justice too, because it was I think a bit wild. And I think the person who played it was like a very good duelist there. But I mean, let me try and pull up that deck. Because it did seem cool. It was for Perfect Circle. It was in the last event. And it actually managed to win the whole event. So it was Wind Beat. Yeah, so it's from Guari. Oh, that's very, very cool. Here, I'll bring it onto screen. I don't know why. So I do have a subscription to Format Library. I don't know why sometimes it still shows me ads. So apologies for the ads on screen here. But hopefully you can see this deck. So it's very, very neat win deck here. And yeah, I will definitely try this out because it first plays in Perfect Circle tournament, and a lot of people view Perfect Circle as like a solved format. But seeing a deck like that, like top, it shows that there's still a lot of depth to find there. And it sort of goes back to like the journey of like GOAT and Edison and things like that, where for a long time, people thought GOAT was solved. People thought that the GOAT control deck was the best deck that you could be playing, bar none. And over time, people realized, hey, there's actually other decks you can play. Like Warriors are good, Earthbeat's good, Chaos Turbo, of course, is good, right? And Chaos Turbo has become the new GOAT control, where people are like, this is the best deck in the format by far. But with more exploration, who knows what you'll find. And people have been making decks that have managed to beat Chaos Turbo in some events, and it's always cool to see. Madcap says, I'm definitely interested in getting more into Perfect Circle. I recently just stumbled my way into finals for the ongoing tournament. It's absolutely not solved. And I agree. I think it's definitely one of the formats that can be improved upon and sort of optimized further, both in the decks that already exist and just other decks out there that people have not found yet. I think the Perfect Circle is one of the more popular formats just in general in retro scene. Like, I feel like even if you've never played the format yourself, you've probably heard of it, right? Like, I feel like Perfect Circle is one that people talk about, even if it's not played as much. But I think in terms of making it like a broadly popular format, it does have some hurdles, I will say. I think Crush Card existing is definitely a downside for it. Not an unsurmountable downside. I think the Crush Card is kind of overhated a lot of the time. And I mean, as that Windbeat deck shows, it's like definitely not necessary to, play Crush Card in a winning deck. But it is something that, like, if you look at the problem cards in the format and the ones that people could potentially just be repulsed by, right? That is definitely one that people might it might be a stumbling block for them getting into it. But I'm a big fan of, like, not sort of just judging a format only by one card or only by just one problematic thing in it, and just playing games in it and seeing how it actually interacts. And I feel like Crush Card in Perfect Circle is definitely not, the end all be all. So that's my opinion on Crush Card, and hopefully people agree with me after they dive into it, because I think it's just a fun format in general. Even when Crush Card gets played, there's still a lot of cool stuff you can do there. But yeah, so I'll make that Perfect Circle vid. I think that'll be fun. I feel like I could have maybe done more with Perfect Circle when I covered it. I think I gave it a fair bit of videos, but for one as popular as PC, I think it maybe deserved more. I don't know. But yeah, definitely one that's fun. And I'm looking forward to the further development of it, because I think people are starting to promote it more. Like, I know Guari is someone who, I think they were promoting Vegas for it for a while, and then they got into Perfect Circle. Now they're doing a bunch of Perfect Circle stuff. So It's cool to see people starting to promote it more and get into it more. So, Matt says, one of, not searchable, that isn't that game breaking, I think. Even does nothing into some decks. And I agree with that. I think that also there are decks that can counter it too. Like, it can be actively bad to play Crush Card against a deck that, like, maybe has an empty board and they've got Lightning Darkest Dragon in hand. You blow up the Lightning Darkest Dragon brings something else back, right? Like, it is definitely a card that can be actively detrimental for you in some situations. And beyond that as well, it's just like, if you built your deck well and if you're playing well, I think that it can definitely not be as bad as you might expect. Like, I honestly hate Dust Shoot more than Crush Card. Like, I know that's a very hot take, but with Crush Card, I feel like, okay, Raigeki, that asks you to Solemn. Yep, that makes sense. But I feel like Crush Card is like, because it doesn't give the opponent choice of what to actually rip apart from my hand, it actually gives me the option to play around it more than something like a Dust Shoot would give me, right? Because I would flip up Dust Shoot, they see my entire hand for that turn, and they get to send back the exact thing that I maybe would want to use, right? So it's like, that's a lot more frustrating to me than Crush Card, where it's like, they see the entire hand, sure, and the next couple draws. But now I know about Crush Card, so I can play around it, and like, I can sort of do stuff with there. Hello, I don't know. Great name, by the way. But welcome to the stream. Okay, Magician of Faith can get flipped up, get a Heavy Storm here, potentially clear that back row. And yeah, it's the only spell there that they can get. Will Soul attack in with the Gumo, and potentially risk half their life. That's the question there. They're debating it. I honestly, you can just leave it. At least that's what I'd do if I was Soul. Sorry, I haven't really been talking about the game. Sometimes I go on tangents, and it can be very fun just talking about, like, per circle and all that stuff, and there's other formats that I think have potential, because I really do think that a lot of formats out there do have potential. I mean, we're seeing that with redo format right now, wind up format, whatever you want to call it. I think people are catching on to how fun that can be, and I hope it does take off, because it's just like, it encourages more people to go back and be like, hey, how we try this format, how we see if we can get this format to have a following, if we can get people playing this format and enjoying this format, and just continuing on with it. So, yeah, I again, a rising tide raises all ships. I think I mentioned this earlier. One retro format success is all retro format success, in my opinion. Wuboku, they're going to be very good at stopping the Master Sorcerer and the Ledge-In from getting in. But Fisher did clear the Gumo quite effectively. Dumbreck got 8 cards to Soul's 4. So even though Dumbreck's at 2,900, they are still in a very, very good spot here. Question is, will Soul be able to defend themselves against the Master Sorcerer, prevent them from getting more sort of advantage here? They know about Heavy Storm in hand, so that can make it a bit awkward for them, but they also know that Dumbreck has a set card there. So Sword of Revealing Light is going to come down. That's very interesting into a heavy. And that's the only card they have, so Dumbreck knows that, like, they can just activate heavy here, get that thing gone with, guaranteed. It will be a 2-for-1 trade, but it's still pretty good. Lodging coming down, Sanguine getting switched to attack, and everything is going in here. Now, is that going to be a stone? It's not, but it is going to be Magician of Faith, which can add back Raigeki, which can be a pretty good swing here for Soul. But, they are drawing a card off masked if there's no Karibo in hand. They're getting in for 3,700 life points here, which is going to be quite a bit. So it's definitely not the worst spot for Dumbtruck to be in, even though that Raigeki could be coming down next turn. And there's a set. There's another set. Pass them back. Saying you don't have heavy, or I've got Solemn, or I don't care if you heavy me. So a lot of different options there. Soul probably has to Raigeki here, even if they don't have aggressive pressure. But we'll have to see. Yeah, it is kind of funny. Bomb Arrow Budget Films mentions that, interesting enough, despite only 3 rounds, we're about on schedule for how long most tournaments last, given the 45-minute time limit. Which is also something that I've talked about in the past, where, like, it can be kind of awkward with a format like Critter to sort of have tournaments with time limits, because the game just goes so long. But yeah, there's Solemn number 1. Is there going to be a Solemn number 2 as well? There might be. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Raigeki coming down. Is there going to be Solemn number 2? Nope, that will go through. So that's going to clear away everything. Does get a search here, but interesting that they solemned the heavy there. That makes me think that there's like a mirror force or something like that in the back row. But yeah, I've talked about this also in conjunction with like 3v3s, like time with the 3v3s, where it can actually run into some problems where, like, let's say the formats were like Critter, Goat, Edison. It's just like Critter's just so much longer than the other two. It'd be kind of awkward. The reason why Gigatech Wolf is potentially played is because this is a Labyrinthine Turbo deck. So basically, you play Polymerization as a way to convert your Thunder Dragons after you've used them with your Muka Mukas into a twin-headed Thunder Dragon. But you want to play more than one Polymerization because you don't want to necessarily like have it just be unfindable in your deck. So you play the Gigatech Wolf to potentially go into a Labyrinth tank off of Gigatech Wolf and Cannon Soldier. You're also playing Triple Last Will and a ton of Cannon Soldiers. So you have a lot of options there to get into it, like without, having to fill your deck up with Gigatech Wolves. That's at least the theory behind why you'd play it. It is definitely a wild strategy. It has actually won a past Critter tournament. So there are some legs to it, although I'm pretty sure in the tournament that it won, Gigatech Wolf was never brought, or not Gigatech Wolf, but Labyrinth Tank was never brought out. But it is sort of like the idea there is there, and it is interesting. Gigatech Wolf also has a pretty decent defense stat. When you think about how many times like Mass Sorcerer can wall up things, Gigatech Wolf has that same defense stat, so that can also wall up things. But yeah, just a very interesting card in general. So I need to see Soul bring it here to the locals as well. And it's definitely a deck that like people were like memeing on this thing when it was first brought, because it first got like second in an event, I'm pretty sure. Like Falco, very, very good duelist. He brought it and he did pretty well in a tournament, but people were like, nah, this is a meme. This was like luck. This was, this is kind of a joke, all that stuff. But then Falco ran it back, won an event with it, and now I don't think it's something that you can really laugh at. Now it's something that you actually have to think about and consider. But yeah, Polymerization is going to close this game out, going for a twin-head Thunder Dragon, attacking over that Witch of Black Forest, and that is going to be the end of the game. So I'm a big fan of Poly into twin-head. I'm not necessarily a fan of going for the Gigatech as well. Like I play like Muka Muka decks with one Poly in it, just as a late game bomb. Because I'm trying to milk the Thunder Dragon for the Muka as long as possible, and then using the Twin Head at the end with Poly. But I really do like it. It's like, it's kind of hard to interact with because like Trap Hole, which is one of your main ways of interaction, doesn't deal with it, right? And it is something where like, if your opponent's only prepared for like the Mukas coming down, they're like, okay, I've got my back row for that. I'm going to deal with that. And then you go for the Twin Head. It's just like, what happened there? That's crazy. It's also extension for your Cannon Soldiers as well. So like, it's another thing to attribute for that. And yeah, it's a very cool card in general. So, very, very cool stuff. Congrats to Soul for winning with a very neat strategy. And yeah, good stuff. Let's see what the next locals will be in here. I've got this wheel of retro formats. I got to cut it down to the formats that I've actually covered, because this is the wheel that I used for my Wheel Wednesdays series that I unfortunately have not had as much time for in the past. Maybe I'll bring that back now that I've got a little bit more time on my hands. But we can do it. We can adjust it for locals here. I'm just going to add in the sort of unlimited formats as well that we have done in the past. I believe that's it. Yes, I believe that's it. So probably wheel changes there. So we got all the formats that we can play in the locals here. And we're going to spin the wheel. I'm going to click it twice, and we'll see what our locals end up as. And it looks like we got a Gladiator locals that will be next week. So Gladiator, a very interesting format. I like this format a lot. Some people do not, but it will be a fun time at least. So that'll be next week's locals. I don't know exactly what date on the weekend it will be, but I will announce in the Discord when I figure that out. And it should be a lot of fun. And then the format after this will be Lightsworn format that I will be having a locals in the following weekend. So that should be a blast. I think that might be 4th of July weekend, I believe. I could be wrong. But it should be fun either way. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed the stream. I'm always happy to host Bon Barrow Budget Films, so glad to do it. And yeah, I mean, this was fun. We finished in the time of 2 rounds in most timed formats, which is actually pretty quick for Critter, I will say. I've seen Critter games draw out for a very long time, so I'm glad we were able to get this one done relatively quickly. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. hopefully, if this was your first introduction to Critter, hopefully you liked what you saw. And if you want to learn more, you can watch my videos on it or head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And if you like what you saw here, like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. But yeah, I should be making another video soon about the Perch Circle deck that won, the Windbeat deck that I talked about earlier. So thank you to everyone on stream for recommending that as a video. And I'm looking forward to playing with it because it seems like a blast. So look forward to that video, and I hope you enjoy it when it does come out. I will see you next time. Congrats, Soul, as well. Your faithful companion, Twin-Head Thunder Dragon. That is a very, very fun card. Yeah, I love Twin-Head, and I love to see it come down in Critter. So glad that it brought you success as well. But anyways, as I mentioned, I'm going to be signing off here. So see y'all next time. Peace.